Ta-da! And welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, a bit of housekeeping. You don't need to follow, like, or subscribe. I just put the videos out where I can and have a damn fine time doing so. Today we have a quick discussion about one of my favorite technological advancements in the modern era, and that's got to be lasers. What can't these wonderful little gadgets do? Well, you're going to see today. And I can personally tell you that today's episode will be a real corker because we're going to talk about cork as well. Now, without being boring, because I know you have plenty of other videos waiting in your YouTube watch list to get through, let's just quickly recap. I did have a chat about cork in an earlier video. I mentioned about purchasing rolls of cork that, of course, I will lay out. I flatten down, take key measurements because we're going to be using it as the track bed. I will then cut it into the appropriate lengths and widths that I need, and then I attach it, of which we'll have a quick demonstration of that as we proceed in the video. Some of the most breathtaking model railway layouts that we have seen achieve such greatness because the attention to detail of what they're trying to model. In my application, it may not be one of the great Taj Mahals of model railway layouts that's going to feature in your upcoming railway magazine, but I know to try and keep things looking good, I need to try and add a little bit of consistency. In the real world application, when we head out into rural or regional areas, of which I'm basically working on this model with, when you do find a straight piece of train line that spans over several kilometers, and on a nice sunny day, if you stand there and look down, while it's mostly quite straight, there will be a few little undulations as it carries on. Again, thanks to the current climate condition and or the general geography, things have a tendency to just wriggle around and move slightly. However, if we come down from a top view and look at a satellite view and then travel up a few hundred meters or several kilometers, generally when we need to see a straight section, it's quite straight. So being on this feature section, I really want to try and keep things looking particularly straight. I've discussed about the backline before. Now the backline is just designed to shuffle the trains back around the loop. So not much of it is going to be seen from a modeling perspective. It just travels along. So as I've been laying it, as you've seen in the backline video, I'm just literally got a rough kind of a template using a piece of timber that I'll put against it, put my track against, and then go from there. If I look down it, there's a few little wiggles as you go along, but it's quite fine and the train will travel smoothly. On the feature section though, I really want to try and get that looking as sharp as possible. Mostly because I want to make sure as the trains are passing by, there is minimum movement and or unnecessary sway that can occur. So I am trying to keep it dead set, level, and as straight as possible. To do that, I'm using one of these lasers. Now, this particular laser is a Prexiso, or it could be Prexiso, it could be Prexiso. Look, I don't know how you want to pronounce it, but this is a crossline laser. So in other words, I have a vertical and I have a horizontal beam that I can achieve here. The other thing is it's also auto leveling within a tolerance. So if I do put it on something that isn't quite flat, it'll automatically adjust itself and correct to give me a straight line. It will flash if it isn't a straight line. These particular lasers can be purchased for about $50 to $100. And of course, if you're a serious carpenter or in an engineering field, you'll appropriately get the right type of a laser. For my purposes, it's been absolutely invaluable. Let's take a look at some photos now of this in action because it's a bit difficult for me to demonstrate. As you can see, what I've done at the end of this particular run is line the laser up to where I would like it to be. I then send it down the line and then lock on to the curve near where the curved viaduct is. I take a few rudimentary measurements along with a ruler as well, and there is some discrepancy, give or take about 1/2 centimeter. Now, once again, this isn't a major thing to stress about, but when you do come down and drop your head down to look at this, I want it to try and stay as true as possible as a straight line, which, as you can imagine, when laying flex track, that can become a little bit tricky even when you do use the Peco track setter. Just before we continue, if we just have a quick look at some footage back here, once again, I'm always talking about using baking paper, and where there's a split in the board where my plywood baseboards come in, I just do each half first. So what I'll do is I'll take a sheet of the baking paper, lift the board up, slide down my baking paper, and then carry on laying on one side. Once it's all dry, I'll fold the baking paper over, do the next side. When it's all dried, pull it out, and we've got two completely separate baseboards that could be split, but most importantly, when they come together, they look absolutely flush. On a note here, as you can see, there's a little bit of movement. That's where I'm just going to take a couple of cabinet connectors, which is literally just a piece of zinc-plated steel here, and we're just going to screw them on, and that'll smooth in nicely. And the only reason is I believe there's a beam running here and here, so that's just where we've got that little bit of indiscretion. Well, let's get that camera in now and lay some cork down, shall we? And see just how simple it is. So if I just bring this camera down here, you'll see where I do actually have my pins marked out. And if we try and look down a straight line, because the others are still there, we have this perfect straight line. And I should have cleared the board earlier, but you'll see the next section of cork, it does all run true down to the other end. But we've still got a little bit we need to correct up here and lay a bit more down. Again, we're just working on this particular section here. Remember, we do have our roadway that's going to come over the two main lines here, and then we absolutely have nothing. It's going to drop away. And there'll be a turn off for a vehicle, and we'll do some gutter work and stuff down here. But then you've got this, which we could argue is going to be an additional siding and or something else I have planned we'll discuss later. But what we're actually going to do is, while we've got our road here, and that's where you can see our second lines here, we're going to restart laying the last piece of cork. Now, this section of track that we're laying isn't actually going to have any physical running trains on it, although it may have something derelict sitting on it later. We're actually going to recreate this particular section of line and landscape it to look like it used to be the main line that used to run, but obviously those boffins and engineers in the boardroom of the rail network decided that there's a better way to expand and put two lines in. So this will now look like a derelict line that we're going to do. So we're still going to lay cork, we're still going to put track on it, but there'll be a lot of vegetation on it, and it is in no way going to be physically connected to the main line. It'll be sort of, you know, the sort of thing, sand clump here, this will have the appropriate siding here. So we still need to get some cork laid. So that's where you're going to join me today, slapping some down. No curves on this one, just a nice straight piece. Right, so here's our section we're going to be getting busy with today. I will just make mention of one thing. While we're going to be laying a strip of cork down, in actual fact, what I am going to do with this little feature section, so to speak, is I'm actually going to lay a piece of cork and down the track, lay a second piece on top of it to give it extra height. Remember, we are quite close to where the lip of the display is, so it doesn't hurt to lift this up, and by the time we've got our track here and loco up, it looks good, but it also gives that defined mainline appearance of a single track line that we would usually see. And for whatever reasons, maybe it was a slightly coastal area just coming off the board, and as a result, it needed to be up deliberately higher anyway. It will still be down into a single one further down, where we're still going to use an active siding, and that's just for the practicality of keeping everything on the same level. But since this one isn't really being used, I think it's just going to add a little bit more visual dimension to what may have been there in a previous lifetime. As mentioned before, the pins have already been laid with the laser, but I thought we'd just take the laser anyway and turn it on, and I just wanted to demonstrate so you can see what I mean here. Bearing in mind I did cut the cork quite straight, and as you can see by that laser line, that's not too bad at all. Of course, if I was to dim the lights off, you'll even see this line a little more defined. But as you can see, if I was to take a series of pins and simply start without getting in the way of the shadow and working my way and pinning them into the middle of that green line, because it's a reasonably broad type of a beam I'm getting there. I might try and see if I can zoom in, but certainly if I do put it in the middle, you will get a shadow. See the pin running in the middle and two green lines on either side. So let's get you in nice and close now, and you can see those 2 lines I'm talking about. So if I was to remove that pin and put it back in, you can see that shadow I'm talking about. Again, every laser is going to be different, and in my application, this one will do just fine. So the next step, what we could just do is take a pen and draw a quick line down the edge here onto the baseboard, and that gives us where it needs to be. There's certainly nothing wrong with doing that, but in this particular occasion, take additional pins and alternatively place the pins against the edge of that piece of cork. And the reason we're doing that, and this will do 2 things for us. The reason I like to do it is this kills 2 birds with 1 stone. One, it sets up the geometry of where I need to just pour some glue. The second thing is when I come down and put the cork, even though I'm focused on that 1 line that I laid before, and it's going to be the closest to the red here, this series of pins, which is in very solidly, it just gives me an additional guideline to where the other one needs to sit, so it's looking reasonably straight. The glue that we're of course using is the Selleys Aquid here, quick set wood glue. The regular one is just fine, and the Copydex is good too. But in this application, I've been doing this method for a long time, and it works quite well. And always starting at one end and coming in just where the line is, make it a little bit thick, because that's going to work along and anchor down that part perfectly. So we're just going to come along to where our end is, and then come back on the return one. Again, we've got our other pins, so that kind of gives us the guidance of where we need to be. And then a little bit of a zigzag, 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 zigzag. And that is it. When it comes to laying down this, I like to start from the middle. Try your best to wiggle in so that you're not pushing too much glue directly around and onto the edge. Now we'll just massage it around those additional pins we had. And as you can see, I've come a little bit, just a little bit there, but we can give it a pull, and what's going to happen now is it's going to spread nice and evenly where we need it to be. We'll just lock and anchor in on the end there. The next thing I like to do is just gently massage it into place. Look, it's all sitting there and it's sitting nicely. However, especially when you're butting up to other joints, you've got some nice stretch and wiggle room. Even if, let's call this section of cork was 1 meter long, you probably can massage out of it an additional 5 centimeters here or there. We don't want to work it too much, but we do want to make sure it's all sitting in the right spot and naturally just flowing. And even putting the laser aside for a minute, I think using your line of sight just to run an eye over it is always a good thing. You're only looking for any obvious dog legs or anything like that. Again, this becomes a little more accurate when we're doing the track. We don't worry too much when we're just laying the cork, because the ballast will generally cascade down and go from there. At the moment, I'm exceptionally happy with this, and at this point, this is where I would just weight down the cork as it's drying. I did say we will be adding an additional section of cork on top. We will do that later, and we're just going to mimic the same thing. So these key pins will stay in the same spot, and I do need to attach a little bit to the next end. I like to let one section dry before I start continuing on to the next one. This is quite quick drying, so you only have to wait about 20 minutes and you're not doing too bad. Most of the time, once I've laid some PVA, I will usually allow 12 to 24 hours because I've got plenty of other things I need to carry on with. Now, when it comes to weighting it down, we can easily now remove those guidance pins we no longer need anymore, put them to the side, and I don't mind just grabbing a section of track that's doing nothing and my good friend soda cans and laying them on. So what's the point about using this track? Why wouldn't I just put soda cans on? Well, it's the webbing that is being used for the sleepers that just provides additional weight load distribution. And I think that's pretty important. We want to try and make sure we're not trying to add copious amounts of weight and getting potholes or anything in here, but just as long as we're adding some weight, nice even distribution means it's going to dry up nice and solid and you'll get an absolutely fantastic result. Again, for sections where you may be joining two pieces of cork up together and there may be a bit of overlap of PVA when those two sections join up and come up over, even though I'm sure you're going to wipe them off with a piece of tissue or paper towel, that is where I definitely recommend our friend baking paper, and you would literally have your two joins and you lay your baking paper down and then just add some sort of a weight on top. And the great thing is, as it dries, this just slides off and nothing's there. I usually like to use something with a bit of weight, like the drill or something like that, or a couple of soda cans stacked on top of each other, just on the end there, because we want to make sure that is 100% anchored up and not going to curl or flip up, particularly if there may be a track joint happening near there as well. So as we slide over here, you can see I just have to add an additional bit that still needs to happen over here. I'm still not sure where it's going to stop just yet. But as I do have the glue on it at the moment, and I can see a few little spickles have just come out there, what we're going to do is we're just going to take some of our beautiful baking paper, we're going to put something quite substantial with weight on it, and now it's all done. We can just leave that now until it's dried. And that's what I'm doing with laying cork. So you can see what I've just done here is I'm just pre-soldering my dropper wires to this point arrangement. They're still just loosely there till they go down, but it's one less thing we need to worry about, and plenty of power in the appropriate joins. And of course, juncturing over the two sections as necessary with the one strand of wire there. Even though this is a rather early time to be showing you this, you can see it's not too bad. I am aware of a little kink up here, but that isn't anything to worry about. I'll be talking about that later. If we just quickly run an eye over here where the 2 points touch each other, you will notice there's a little bit of a whoopsie daisy that happened here. And if we just zoom in on some extra still photos I've taken, I did do my best then to correct it, and I think it's come up not too bad. Again, for most of you, you'll come back and stand over here when you watch the trains go by and it's barely noticeable. But I thought I need to point it out because po body's nerfed. Well, that now concludes this video. I thought you'd love to see just the process I'm doing here in laying cork down for my particular layout. So until the next one, stay safe. Toodles!